There, everyone's here, I think. Okay. Hi, everybody. So my name is Jessica Egley. I'm going to get us kind of started here. Let me get ready. Okay. So thank you. Welcome to this Talkback for Ghost Creek. Thank you so much, all of you, for watching the film and for supporting this effort. I have been working for the Englert for over 12 years, mainly in production logistics. So when the pandemic hit, I was a little nervous because it's very hard to manage the logistics of events when there are no live events. So, but as many of you can relate to, I'm sure, we on this call are excited to share how we have continued to produce and share our work in this new virtual world. So Ghost Creek was born in response to the cancellation of Mission Creek Festival and the world of hardship that we faced in 2020 brought, that is also what it is about, and we're just going to tell you all about it. I'm like reading a script and also improvising at the same time. That's a thing I need to work on. So first, let's all agree here, people who are here, to make this a safe and respectful and comfortable space for everyone who's in attendance. And as this is a live and unrated event, the views expressed may not be the views of the Englert Theater, Mission Creek Festival, or the artists on this call, and there's always the potential for mature language, so viewer discretion is advised. Disclaimer. All that said, I would love to get started by sharing a little bit about our panelists. As I mentioned, my name is Jessica Egley. I am the events director for the Englert Theater, and I was the producer of Ghost Creek. My educational background is in acting and theater arts, while my professional background is it's more about arts administration and arts education. Ben Handler, who adapted, directed, and thoroughly created this film, is a cinematographer living in Iowa City. He has shot 4 feature films, having just wrapped principal photography on the documentary Hockeyland, directed by Iowa City's own Northland Films. He is in pre-production on a few projects now, including a film supported by Produce Iowa's Green Light Grant. When not filming, there's a high likelihood that Benjamin is outside someplace playing rec sports or just ambling around town. Rachel Yoder, who wrote the original story from which the film was adapted and wrote and performed the voiceover. She is the author of Night Bitch, her debut novel set for release in July of 2021, which has also been optioned for a film by Annapurna with Amy Adams set to star. She is a graduate of the Iowa Nonfiction Writing Program and also holds an MFA in fiction from the University of Arizona. She lives in Iowa City with her husband and son. Sharina Honoré, our star, is an Iowa City-based artist. Her Iranian-American heritage and bicultural upbringing are an important aspect to her identity and her art, inspiring works of poetry, writing, and published research. Ghost Creek is her debut film, and she looks forward to working on more creative projects in the future. So I'm going to start things off with a question directed to Rachel. That said, we would love this to be a conversation. So anyone on the panel is welcome to chime in at any point. And guests, if you have a question, please type it into the chat and we will get to it as soon as we can. But to start things off, Rachel, can you help me speak to why Mission Creek Festival decided to commission this film in lieu of being able to produce the live festival in 2020?
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit at the very least. If you'll all remember, societies sort of shut down mid-March last year, and Mission Creek was scheduled for April. So we had everything in place for what we thought was going to be an absolutely stellar festival. And it was, I mean, as many things have been this year, it was a really big heartbreak to have to call it off. Um, and I guess maybe a couple months after that, I remember it being the summertime, and Andre Perry, the director of the Angler, said he wanted to talk to me about something in true kind of Andre fashion, cryptic Andre fashion, and actually presented this idea that he'd been thinking about for something called Ghost Creek. And he was, very kind of philosophical in the way he presented it to me. It was just this sort of mood and idea, and, someone wandering around an abandoned Iowa city, maybe wandering into places where music was happening. We didn't really know who or what they were yet, or, why it was happening. And he said, well, how about you write something? Which sounded fun to me, right? It was just this sort of little prompt. It was a way to take the sort of heartbreak that we still had lingering from Mission Creek and turn it into art, to take that and say, okay, well, how can we still feature local artists and make something beautiful out of this sort of heartbreak that we feel, because I think we were all, as a country, really heartbroken at that time. It was the summer. There was a lot of uncertainty. We didn't know, my son was home with me. I didn't know if he would be in school in the fall. And so we were just kind of sitting in the middle of this like hot uncertainty, and not knowing what the future would look like. And so it was this wonderful project to focus on. And it was kind of like more of the unknown. Like at that time, I don't think I knew who the director was. I didn't know who was acting in it. I knew nothing about it. It was just kind of like, take this idea, develop it more. And then I gave it to Andre, I think in July, and didn't hear from anyone for months, and really didn't know what was going on. And so it was a really, I would love to hear from Ben, Sharina, like, and you, Jess, too, like what happened, because I feel like it got made in a really non-conventional way, right? It was sort of like telephone for filmmaking, where you hand it off to the next person and then something happens and then you see it once it gets like back around the circle. So I don't know, maybe that's a nice segue into kind of everyone sort of talking about how you came onto the project, and what that was like for you, like walking into this thing that was maybe, in whatever phase it was in at the time.
Yeah, I can hop in here. When Andre approached me, it was probably one stage further, along than when Andre approached Rachel. And I have her treatment, which is this beautiful moody piece that kind of we took the mood of this and we're like, okay, how do we create this world that Rachel has created and make something that is shootable, that we can do in Iowa City, that sort of highlights Iowa artists and plays to the strengths that I have. And they're, Andre and all the Angler staff and Jess, just super supportive. They're like, okay, well, what do you want to do? How do you want to make this your own? And so I got to play telephone a little bit, and then I got to hand this back off to Rachel. I got to hand it back off to like some super talented sound. We have Ghost Choir, which is Sam and Gabby, who work for the Angler and did a lot of the original music. We have all the super talented artists we got to bring on. So it's like all my favorite artists in Iowa City or in Iowa that we got to bring on. It's like the conglomeration of artists in Iowa, which was super cool. We got to play telephone a little bit, like, here, go do a thing and then see what happens,
Iowa. She had gotten a master's degree, and I had done a lot of projects for her as a subject for her assignments in class. And I also have done a lot of assignments for I just happen to have miraculously a lot of friends, and my sister included, as a film student graduate from University of Iowa. So I've always wound up on their projects. So when I was reached out for this, I was thrilled. I wasn't sure exactly. I was hearing, the trickle down effect of the idea, but I think we eventually kind of pieced it together. And a lot of things I feel like were improv'd, what just really felt right, what felt natural. Ben, I really liked working with you and Jessica too, because like I think it just was really organic, the way things would come up. I didn't feel pushed into doing something unnatural to me, which is helpful. And I can act in ways that I feel like are pretty natural anyways. So, but yeah, that's kind of how I came upon this as well. And I'm really glad I did.
I'm curious.
I mean,
I actually have a question.
No, Rachel, go ahead.
Can you talk a little bit, like, was there a script, or like, how did you go about sort of presenting this to Sharina, Ben? And then like, was there sort of a written down plan of, what you were shooting and how you were shooting it? Or was it sort of this mix of like, maybe kind of like an outline, but also improv? What did you kind of know from the beginning you really wanted to have in there, and what sort of changed the most as you moved through it?
Yeah, we had like a bunch of ideas that we were like, okay, we have this world, what do we do? And we were like, okay, so it's a documentary, the derecho, all the stuff that's happened, how do you make this, like, how do you tell a story and do it justice and like do it in a 20-minute or whatever segment? And it's like, so we started thinking documentary, and then we're like, okay, well, let's try something fiction. Let's try something that celebrates music, that celebrates life in Iowa City. And so we had this outline. I remember showing it to Andre and and Jess and all the guys. And I'm like, okay, here's like a PowerPoint presentation of 20 images, and I was pulling from films. I had like, I don't know, a shot from like Ex Machina of the girl when she's finally free and she's walking out in this like, there's shots where you see, and you're like, oh, this kind of looks like something from this movie. So I was very drawn to like visual moments. There are things I really like that I thought would play well in this world. And then I remember, so there, Andre and all the guys were like, hey, we trust you. You roll with it. If you think that's the play, like, let's try it. And I was like, all right, well, this is cool. So like, how do we incorporate musicians? And then pretty much going to Sharina was like, okay, these are the moments we have. Our first shoot was in Cedar Rapids, and some of this made the film, but not all of it, And so we're in Cedar Rapids walking around during, this is maybe a month after the derecho, and we're trying to like show someone reacting to this world. And I remember feeling a little lost, and I'm like, well, how do we capture this and do it justice? And and I think Sharina and I were both like, okay, we're gonna have to adapt. And like, as we kept shooting, Sharina doesn't have a ton of experience on screen, but like it came through just her naturalness. And I was like really blown away when she was like doing a lot of the janitor stuff. And I'm like, I kind of think you're a janitor. You're really doing a good job. So yeah, it started to work,
It's my natural love for cleaning, stress cleaning. But thank you. Yeah, exactly. I did love the creative freedom. There was a lot to work with, and it felt like the whole project was completely collaborative in that sense. We were able to kind of play with some ideas and see if things made sense on screen. And it was nice because, yeah, like Ben said, I don't really have a whole lot of experience on screen, but I've worked with some people doing like for class. So I kind of know a little bit. So I would ask Ben, can you play that back for me? And it was just a huge learning experience. And just creatively, I think there was the amount of freedom allowed really comes through in a good way. This whole year, this whole pandemic has been nothing but unpredictable. And I think that Ben did a really good job capturing that kind of feeling of unpredictableness.
Yeah, that, I mean, it was definitely I didn't work with you all that much, Ben, but definitely my experience of you as a director is one where you just asked me, and it sounds like you asked Sharina too, to kind of trust the process. And I felt really okay doing that with you because of your just sort of calmness and patience. When we sat down, there was no, voiceover really until the film was shot. And so going back through it and just kind of working with you, and like we didn't know exactly what we wanted, but what worked, and then sitting down and doing stuff on the fly, which I was very terrified of when I first walked into the angler. But um, yeah, I just really admired that about the way you came to the project, right? Just asking you, having the confidence to trust your own process, and then inspiring that confidence in the people who are around you.
Yeah, and it was a lot of playing. It was cool. I had fun.
For sure. I think, Jess, you and I had also talked a little bit about how you had never served as a producer for a film project, and how there was definitely a learning curve, one might say, and some surprises along the way. And I was wondering what those were. How was this new for you, and what were some surprising bits for you?
Yeah, I think the it was definitely a new process. I had never I mean, anytime I've worked on a film, I've been an actor, and that's like tiny itty bitty things. So being a producer was a super fun new experience for me. And I think this was kind of a unique experience because when I am producing Mission Creek Festival or Witching Hour or any show at the Anglert, I'm I'm not working independently, but I'm working independently on the stuff I'm responsible for. And then I have a team of people that I collaborate with to just do the thing that needs to get done. And we all know what that thing is. It's very clear. It's the same every time. Whereas this was an opportunity I didn't know what was going to happen. Every day was different. We might have been going into some shoot one day and it turned into like a completely different thing. And so like rolling with the punches, which is something I should be comfortable with as, an event planner. Like it was just so different because we weren't responsible for anybody's experience yet. We were just working together on something that nobody could see yet. It was ours, like little secret kind of. So that was what was fun about it and what was new about it. And I had to like relax a lot to be able to work like that, because what I'm good at is I do a thing, I know exactly how to do that thing. It's the same every single time. And I'm the expert at that thing. And this was like, no, I'm part of a group of people who are working on a whole brand new thing. And so it was so cool.
You're
I don't know
working
if that made any
with
sense.
That's very like herding cat artist type of thing. It's funny because my day job is also events, Jess. So
Yeah.
but I think I run events a lot differently because I'm just more like fly by the seat of my pants. If someone changes their mind, I'm like, whatever, I just want you to be happy. It's your wedding day. And so this process was more natural to me because Ben was like, wait, no, let's actually go, let's totally change of plan. And I was just like, okay, wherever, fine. But I think it worked out really well. And your personality, Jess, we definitely needed to just be like, nope, because you oftentimes pointed out to us like, this does not make sense for the story. Let's reel it in. So definitely need those kinds of personalities.
Sharina, I'm so curious about what was your process for developing the character and like approaching this character? Kind of what did you have going into it, and what was really, I don't know, important for you, and sort of figuring out, who you were and how to portray that?
That's a really good question, and it was interesting because I'm both. It took me a while to realize that my ghost was more of this happy idea of what Awira, the janitor, wanted and was longing for. And I once I started to kind of get that in my mind, I understood that the janitor was just, it's more like us, what we're kind of going through, just the sludge of every day, like get out of bed. I mean, she doesn't have to do Zoom meetings every day from 9 to 5, but she's a janitor working in an empty building, and then there's a derecho, of course, but she's all alone, and just dealing with that and dealing with the longing of not being able to see people when her ghost can see all these people. So it was harnessing two different mindsets, and that to me, I just had to kind of keep in mind just more of a joyful side, and this, I think it was in that sense very relatable. I'm trying to keep my good spirits up for the ghost, and then the not so, the negative side of me was easy to come out in Awira, because it's truly how I was feeling, and I wanted it to be, that made the most sense, because I think that's what we're kind of all feeling right now. We're trying to find bits of joy in the ghost, in her happy dancing scenes, and we can all very much relate to the trudge and the grudge of working day to day through this pandemic.
For sure.
In the vein of kind of adapting to our surroundings in a joyful way as we can, if we can, I do have a question from one of our guests here. The question is to the whole group. Since the project started in the immediate aftermath of the festival cancellation and the pandemic and the derecho, how did the perspective on the story change as everyone got distance from its origin? That might be good for you to start with, Ben.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I heard about the project like almost immediately after the derecho. I mean, I might be messing the timeline up. We might have talked about it slightly prior to that, but I believe we talked about it. Like, I was filming in Cedar Rapids for a documentary, and I remember talking like, oh, we can't not tell this story. Like, this is too important to tell. But then also thinking like, then this is what we talked about before, where it's like, is this a documentary? Is this a narrative? Is this a music video? How does this tie into the festival? There's all these things that you have to tie in. I mean, there's so many 2020, like Black Lives Matter. What does this look like? How do we tell the story without being being as respectful as we can be? And then, yeah, every day that went by, like, it was a month later when we went down to Cedar Rapids, and it was so much different than it was when I was filming there, like 4 days after the derecho happened. So yeah, hopefully we did justice, but it's a big story,
Yeah, I would say it changed constantly because the pandemic was changing constantly. We were all of us, I want to also just shout out and props for the professionalism. It was really hard, but we had to maintain 6 feet, of course, at all times, wear masks, unless I was like on film or something. But the situation is constantly and was constantly changing, and we did want to reflect that. But I think that's where, again, to kind of go back to this idea how it was just this, telephone, and things were kind of changing, but somehow it was pulled off, and that's Ben for putting it together beautifully in a way that's coherent and in a way that makes sense visually. But yeah, it's not easy when things are constantly changing and you can't really stick with a plan, but that's just also the unprecedented times, as everyone loves to call these times.
I was say that was not unique to this project.
That's
was just everybody.
We're doing it now. Yeah. Not for the type A personality.
Yeah.
Which I am, so it's hard.
I thought it was really interesting. Again, I was kind of like, I'll write this little story, and then I think, kind of like I saw a cut of the film that was like the next step for me or something. And what I wrote was really kind of unmoored from like the specifics of what was going on here. It was more sort of like, I mean, I guess it did kind of gesture towards some stuff that was happening, but to see that sort of idea taken and like placed in Iowa City, and we didn't know the derecho was going to happen. So to then see like the specifics of that, and then not knowing like who the musicians were going to be or what the music was going to be like, and seeing that element. And I guess I hadn't even really thought about, how there would sort of be like a music video element to it. And that was wonderful to see. And I love that it has all these textures, right? Like it has the texture of documentary, it has the texture of a music video, and then it has the texture of just sort of like a narrative, like a narrative feature. And we get to switch among those different modes, which is one of the delights, I think, of the piece. And yeah, and I love that about it. I love that it's searching through all these different modes for like the best way to tell the story, and we get to come along for the ride.
Yes. So I just got a question in the chat. One that says, are we opening this up for questions from the audience? Yes, absolutely. Please feel free to share your questions in the chat. And then, but right before that, there was a question that completely fits into what you were just talking about, Rachel, which is, can you talk about the music? It was really good. Ben, I feel like, can you start with that? I know you chose a good amount of the music, if not all of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just being in Iowa City and going to shows in like, honestly, Mission Creek, like I've probably learned about some of these bands, and like a lot of us like, okay, who do I think fits this mood, and how can we pick someone local? And not only that, like the local bands are really good. And a lot of these bands and like artists, people haven't heard of. Like, I mean, Mary Blazon, for example, the track with the one of the first tracks, the Ghost. I talked to my buddy Jim Swim. I'm like, dude, we need a track for this. Like, you got something? And he's like, you got to hit up Mary. I'm like, all right. And he sent me the track, and it was so good. I'm like, we had shot the scene already. We shot the scene to a different song that we couldn't get the licensing for. It was not a local artist, but a very good artist. And we plugged this other track in. It was like, it made this so good. Like, it made it incredible. So I was super excited to plug a local artist. And also I'm like, this is made for this scene. And I mean, across the board, like Lily was incredible. We had thought a long time about who to put in that moment. And like, Lily was brought up, I believe, by Savannah Lane as an option. And we listened to some of the songs, and like, this seems to fit the moment. This is right. And like a lot of it, there was no like, it wasn't like a long committee process. It was like, well, what feels right here? And some of it was after the film was even done. Some of it was before. But yeah, I'm glad that the music is something that people appreciate, and it was great working with the local artists.
Yeah,
and
it's nice to have that.
I just had another. I have so many questions. So I guess I had assumed, I mean, was that something it sounds like, Ben, you just kind of like found the music on your own. Maybe you worked a little bit with Savannah, but it wasn't something that was sort of like pre-picked by folks at the Angler. It was more like, we'll, help you with some ideas if you want some, but really like, just go for it.
Yeah, I mean, Jess, hop in here if I'm wrong. I'm trying to remember every moment, but like some of it was just like, I would watch the cut we had shot, or I do a quick rough cut. And I'm like, a lot of times we didn't shoot scenes to music. There was, the hip hop, the breakdancing scene was not shot for a particular song. I edited it after the fact to that song by Trouble Lights. And I liked that band for years. I think they're like an incredible Iowa band. And so I reached out to Philip, who's like one of the guys in the band. I'm like, hey, can we use your song? He's like, oh, heck yeah, let's do it. So Jessica, I mean, we talked a long time about the last song in the film, and it came about pretty organically. But other than that, I'm trying to think who I'm missing here.
I think everything was really organic. The beauty of post-production is that you can really set something to a song as needed. Like tell me if I'm wrong, but if you had to adjust the tempo just even slightly so that it fit the song, then maybe you did that, or maybe it was just exactly right anyway, because we didn't shoot to music most of the time. And if we did, I think the one time we did it didn't work out to even use that song. So it was a big part of post-production, is figuring out how to align the music with the content of the film. And I feel like there was never a conflict in that area. It just worked. And there was it just worked.
Yeah, if anything, I think having music confuses things, and fortunately the magic can happen in post-production for that exact reason. But the only thing is, I think that music would have helped, which, like, the break dancers, they were dancing to their own music to get themselves going. And then the scene in when I was the ghost was in the just kind of dancing around and twirling, it helped me to have music. But I think that's the beauty and the magic of having the option to do all of that in post-production. So it was kind of amazing for me to see, because we shot a lot, and so I was curious to see what ended up being used in the end and what was cut. So because I mean, obviously it all came together beautiful. It's just very interesting to see that, knowing I've seen so much more that we shot.
Was there anything kind of big that got left out in the end that surprised anyone? Or
Let me think.
Maybe in writing, like in scenes that we had planned to shoot did not happen. But I don't think that anything we shot, or nothing major that we shot, was cut. I don't think.
I saw pretty much everything. It's just like, it all feels slow, when you're there. When Ben and I were in Cedar Rapids, he took me to this gym that had been completely destroyed by the Duray show. Like, and it looked like a ghost town. It was a perfect place to be shot in. So to see this whole building with mirrors, literal mirrors, all over the floor, and my dress was just like getting caught and all that. It was really cool. But I don't there were so many cool scenes, that there was just little bits of it in the final production. So. And that's not a critique or anything. It's just that's how it ended up.
Right.
These long moments of filming, and then it's always amazing when it comes into the final story.
There was a longer version of the film, maybe not substantially, maybe 25 minutes. And some of it, I got feedback from other filmmakers saying, we got to get to the point, and keeping the film interesting and in the fitting with the tone of the world. So I have 8 hours of footage from Cedar Rapids, some from the day me and Trina were there, other stuff that I had shot, and it just doesn't necessarily fit into the world we've created. And that's why a longer form project, maybe that's where you get that stuff. But there's no scenes that we cut. There's some scenes we cut on the drawing board, when Trina's looking at the drawing in the museum. That was supposed to be an entire scene where there's a little kid in the museum, and she's remembering what it was like to be in the museum. And we only ended up filming the part where she picks up the drawing, and hopefully it makes sense. So some of these are fractions of ideas that just kind of fit the moment,
Yeah.
But I think that's so important that that little bit of scene that made it into the film has this huge backstory, because that was known when Sharina was doing that acting. So like, I mean, you can speak for yourself, Sharina, but like, I'm thinking as an actor that if I knew that the reason I was picking up that photo had something to do with this bigger story, my acting would be different than if it was just pick up the picture and put it on the wall.
Yeah.
Like, do the thing.
Yeah. I think that actually in the long run for me ended up helping, that I wasn't quite sure where the story was going. It felt I wanted to keep my mind and like the direction, at least my vision, pretty malleable, because I knew that the harder I constrained it to my vision, the more strained my face would have been, the less relaxed, the more forced. So I think because I also knew that Ben can take if my face looked awkward in one instance, maybe there were like 3 more seconds of footage that it looked more natural, and he could have edited that. So, but yeah, I think it actually helped that I wasn't really just glued or committed to any one idea in my mind, and it was okay that things just kind of switched. But I can see how that could also go the opposite way for someone reading a script and expecting the script to go exactly that way.
Sharina also had 0 lines in the film,
Right.
so that's something to like highlight. So she had to do everything by facial expression, and it's hard not to overdo that. So I think she did a great job of being like, she's a canvas for the audience. So how do you show that without being like telegraphing what you're doing? You know, it would be so very over dramatic if she looked at the drawing and was like this big reaction. It's like that's not what the moment needed. But even you're not speaking at all. How do you portray stuff? Like it's acting, I guess.
That was definitely my biggest fear would be, because Iowa City is a small enough community, so people being like, "Oh my God, that was so cheesy." Like but yeah, it is. You're right, Ben. Like and Jess would always tell me to smize. Smile with your eyes. That was a big thing to have to do.
Hashtag Tyra Banks. Sorry.
Yeah.
Credit due to Tyra Banks.
America's Next Top Model plug. It is very, very difficult. Like just the slightest head tilt, and I didn't want to look too pissed off going to work, but I was trying to portray just like slight exhaustion and weariness from the pandemic. And watching this, I was asking my boyfriend John, "Do I look pissed?" Which also, side note, I know it's really confusing. My name is not Johnny 5. It's Sharina. I'm just on his computer tonight. Didn't think about that.
I see that do we want to take a few more questions, Jess? Do we have time? Okay.
Yeah, we should take at least 1 or 2 more, I think. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, there's a couple here. One from Jesse for Ben, 2 questions. I'll give you the first one and then you can answer it and I'll say the second one.
Okay.
It says, several of the cuts coupled with specific sounds reminded me of the movie Requiem for a Dream. What were some of the films you drew inspiration from? I know there was another one that you had mentioned, which I'm already forgetting, but yeah.
I would say we had probably 3 major films that we were pulled from. Tree of Life, love it or hate it. It's like a visually striking film. So we were very like, okay, how do we make it feel real? Tree of Life feels real. It's got this nice voiceover. It gets a little off the rails for me personally, but that was one of them.
And it's so wild because I was making Malik jokes at our voiceover.
I know when you said that, I'm like, oh, this is pretty fit.
I love Malik, and but yeah, I was like, oh, I can see it like going into like maybe bad Malik train. So that, I mean, it feels like you totally nailed that. And go on.
Yeah, no, that was a big one for us. Let's see, Arrival, partially for the voiceover. I remember telling you, I love the tone of Arrival. love how downcast it is, and a lot of like the scenes where just Awira in her house. I'm like, how do you make this feel like the weight of the world is on your shoulders? And you'll see there are crop bars that come in for every shot with Awira, and it's full screen for the ghost, because the ghost's world is so much bigger, and Awira feels trapped. So we tried to like do this like, okay, these bars are physically trapping her into this world. Those were the two big. Jess, do you remember? Did we talk about other
A
films?
Ghost Story.
Oh my gosh, of course, like duh, like it's very similar to A Ghost Story, which I personally I love this movie. It's a contemplation about life, and it's pretty much just a ghost walking around in a sheet, and they don't talk at all. It's beautiful. So
Yeah, those are amazing references, and I can see echoes of those for sure. The second question is, after having the privilege of working with you a few times, I've been able to understand some of your methods and secret weapons, one of which is the one wheel. It was evident you used the one wheel for several of the moving shots. How clutch has the one wheel been in your production workflow? Tell us about the one wheel.
Hey Jesse.
It's amazing. The one wheel's amazing. Sorry.
It's so wow, it does so much. Every filmmaker needs this thing.
Please explain yourself, Ben.
Okay. It's like a skateboard with one wheel, and you balance on it, and it's electronic. And it's a really cool tool for filmmakers, because you can, if you get good at it, you can ride it during the shots. So for most of the music video scenes where the camera seems to be moving very freely, that's shot on while I'm on this board, moving around. So it just gives this hovering ghostly feel. That was kind of what we were going for that. And I will say, like Mary's song, the teacher, I don't know if this is actually what it says, but Julie just made a reference to it. It says one wheel in the song. I don't know if it's an actual reference to a one wheel. I'm like, what the heck? So listen back to the first music video sequence with the ghost and the projector, because I think it says one wheel.
I will say, as producer, I was a little bit scared of the one wheel, because what I didn't want was like a workers' comp situation. I just, the whole time I would watch and be like, don't fall, don't fall, don't fall, don't fall, don't fall, don't break your camera, don't hit an actor.
I've hired Ben. Sorry to bump in here. I've hired Ben for UI Healthcare, and I had the same thought. Don't break your legs. You're going to sue us.
But everything was all good.
I haven't fallen yet with the camera. I think.
Camera
Knock on
fell
wood.
on itself. Like that was, there was a moment
I remember that.
when we were all just not doing anything. I'm telling you, that building is haunted. And it just, for no reason, started to fall. And one of Ben's assistants caught it on his chin.
Yeah, shout out to Freddie Bong. He caught the camera on his foot and seriously hurt his foot, but he did it for the production. So that was really, it's like,
Scary.
dude, wow.
For beauty's sake.
Beauty's
So we are about an hour past the end of the film. So I'm happy to wrap this up, but does anybody have any last burning questions or comments or thoughts in our last 4 minutes here from the audience or from the panel?
I just wanted to say really quickly, I know I've been talking a lot, but how inspiring it was to have the support and the resources in the space to be a part of this, and to have a generative spirit even amidst this nightmare that we've been all going through. And I just wanted to thank the Angler and thank Andre especially for turning to art in our kind of darkest hour, bidding us turn to art in our darkest hour. And I think, ultimately what came out of it was this love letter to our community And that's what really resonated with me as I was writing, and then like coming back to it after, you know, Ben had shot it and edited it so beautifully, was it really brought together why I live here, why I love living here, why I love the people here. And drove home for me, you know, like what makes this my home and why it will always be my home. And I just found it to be really touching. And it just made me remember all of you who are here tonight. And even, you know, the folks who aren't here. Like, I think we all really miss you. We miss each other. And that's what this film was for me. So thank you, Ben, for just like articulating that so beautifully, and Sharina for, you know, beautifully acting in it, and Jess for bringing it all together. Art means like a lot more these days, and it can mean a lot more. And I think that was realized in this. So thanks to everyone.
Well, that was a lovely way to conclude this conversation. I think I'm like tearing a little bit. Thank you everyone for joining us for this Talkback. Thank you for supporting the film, for supporting the Angler and Mission Creek Festival, and all these lovely artists and everyone who is involved. You know, it takes a village. So please enjoy the rest of your evenings, and look for us when things come back, because we'll be ready. Good night.
Night.